with their assent, and packed their first orders on the kitchen table. Tom and his brother were raised in Bebbington in Merseyside by their science teacher mum, Anna, and dad, Steve, who worked in construction. Prior to launching Castore, Tom spent 3 years at Lloyds Bank, where he worked as an associate director in acquisition finance origination. Tom was a professional football player for Tranmere from the age of 17 to 21, and also spent some time overseas playing in Spain for Jerez Industrial, and apologies for my pronunciation. He attended the Glen Hoddle Academy there also, and from playing for Tranmere to being listed in Forbes as one of their 30 under 30. So an amazing journey and rapid rise to business success. As mentioned earlier, Ian King, business presenter for Sky News and member of our AMBS advisory board, will facilitate the discussion this evening. There will be plenty of opportunity to ask questions, so please do note those down as we go through, and that includes for those joining us online, where we'll have the opportunity for you to also ask questions. But without further ado, I'm sure you're eager to hear from Tom, so we'll hand over to him now for the lecture. Thank you, Tom.
Very much indeed. And guys, it's a privilege to be here. I'll stand. I don't like sitting down when I'm talking. I don't know if there's a clicker for the slides for this one. But no, it's an absolute privilege to be here, guys. When Ian asked me on one of the couple of times now that I've had the privilege of being on the show, it really was an honor, and hopefully at risk of not wanting to start off with a cliche, one of the things that I most profoundly believe in, I guess as the title of this discussion says, is that anyone, genuinely, truly anyone can start a business. You definitely need some good luck along the way. You definitely need to meet some of the right people who will help you. No one, maybe with the small exception of kind of truly unique individuals like Steve Jobs and people like that, but almost no one can do it on their own. So you absolutely will need help. But when I know there'll be a range of ages in the room, but when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, as you said, I was doing something completely different. I thought my life would go in a very, very different direction. There was no kind of lead indicator that would give anyone the sense that I would have the ability to start a company, let alone kind of have any sort of success with that company. And really, it's been no more or less complex than we've worked incredibly hard. We've refused to give up. We've tried our best to have a bit of fun every day, and we've dreamed really, really big. And I'll try and take the time today to talk you guys through a little bit about my specific journey, which hopefully you guys will be able to draw some parallels on. I'll then move on and spend a little bit of time talking about the business model itself, which sport is interesting to say the least. When I started Castore, I didn't have any grey hair or wrinkles, and now I've got a lot of both. And so there may not be too many parallels for people looking to go into other industries. But as I tell you a bit about the business model and how we've tried to do what we've done, hopefully there'll be some useful parts of that. And then I'll try my best to finish off with, I don't think there's any such thing as kind of shortcuts to success. I think that's very difficult, and sometimes social media will have us believe otherwise, that if you can read an inspirational quote every day, you're going to be successful. Maybe I'm kind of cynical at the grand old age of 34, I don't know, but I'll try and give you some of the, I guess, values that I try my best to follow. And like all of us, I'm certainly not perfect. I guess no one is. But if you follow kind of those rules, you've probably got a better chance than many of being successful, whether that's starting your own company or within another organization. So I guess starting at the beginning, as the guy said in the introduction, I don't come from any entrepreneurial background whatsoever. I was born in Merseyside, a very, what I would think of as traditional working class family. My mum was a teacher. My dad worked in construction. We didn't kind of spend our evening dinners talking about business ideas or entrepreneurship or anything of that nature. But we were very, and I'm kind of eternally grateful for this, a very loving family. We were instilled with, I guess, traditional values: work hard, try your best to be a good person, try your best to treat others with respect, and don't think that you can't achieve anything if you believe it. Why can you not do it? If someone else can do it, why can you not do it? And I guess looking back, and probably like all of us when you're younger, you don't necessarily appreciate your parents as much as we could or should do. But that was just a massive blessing to have that value of work hard, be ambitious, believe you can achieve something is something that really is powerful. And people will have different views on how that manifests itself. And people talk about visualization and other things. But for me, you're not going to achieve much in life unless you genuinely believe that you can. And it all starts inside your own head. So very, very lucky to have that kind of very loving, close-knit, traditional family values in terms of upbringing. It was described very eloquently and maybe a bit too kindly in the opening words. I was a professional footballer technically, and I did sign a contract with the mighty Tranmere Rovers, who, unless anyone in the room is very sad, you may not have heard of. They're in the third tier of English football, but I didn't actually play professionally for Tranmere. So I'm not quite as skinny as I used to be, but when I was 18, I was very small and very skinny. And those characteristics are not particularly well suited to the physical rigors of lower league English football. So being the highly intelligent individual that I thought I was back then, I thought, okay, I'm not big enough or strong enough to make it in England. I'm going to go to Spain, where they're kind of well respected for being more technical and tactical in how they play. So went over there and very quickly realized that I wasn't big or strong enough to make it in England, and I wasn't tactical or technical enough to make it in Spain. So got to the grand old age of 22, which is, of course, very young in the real world, but positively middle-aged in the world of elite sport, and basically had a decision to make and had to think about, okay, am I going to make it at the highest level? Or if I want to be successful in my life, do I need to go off and do something else? And it's, I guess, moving on a little bit, I'll come back to that. But basically, I was very lucky. My brother was equally mediocre in his chosen sport, which was cricket. And I guess looking back, it was a fantastic lesson in it's okay to fail. And I know that sounds really basic, but at that point in my life, I had dedicated myself wholly and unreservedly to trying to be a professional footballer. And when that doesn't happen, and by the way, I know there's bigger problems going on in the world, so I definitely kind of didn't sit and feel sorry for myself too much. But in my little world, it was the end. Oh my God, my dad had spent every weekend driving me to football matches. He'd specifically taken a job that allowed him to leave work early so he could take me to training. And when you fail at that, which in my head I had, that is really hard to take. But actually, looking back, it was an amazing lesson, because you do feel sorry for yourself. Yeah, I did. Anyway, you have a little cry and kind of think, oh my God, how has this happened? And then you realize that the sun rises the next day, and I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but no one else in the world gives a shit about your little problem. So you've got to dust yourself down and get on with it. And I mean, we were just discussing it before. My brother had taken a very different path. We co-founded Castore together. His sport was cricket, as I said, but the nature of cricket is different from football. So he did go to university. He studied law up at Newcastle, which I guess probably one of the key points that I want to bring out today is that there's no singular route to success. There isn't a particular path that you have to follow in order to be successful in life. And I sometimes think that society as a whole has us believe that. And I remember when we were starting Castore, I worked really hard to try and find inspirational stories that I could say, right, that person's done it. I'm going to try and do this. And almost all of the stories that I read were about people like Steve Jobs or Richard Branson, these guys that had started their first business kind of selling sweets at the tuck shop in primary school and made their first million by 12. And you kind of think, shit, I didn't do any of that. There's no way on earth I'm going to be good enough to do this. And And like I said, actually, as you go through life, you learn there is no right or wrong way. You have to work it out as you go along. Don't let anyone tell you that, oh, you failed as a footballer. There's no way on earth you're going to be able to start a business in the industry, which is what everyone did for me. So Phil and I stopped playing sport at a broadly similar time. We're both pretty young guys. Kind of there was an interim period between stopping playing football and starting Castore. I won't go off topic too much because it's not the purpose of this discussion, but one of my big beliefs, aside from kind of wanting to show people that anyone can start a business and be successful, but I am a massive believer in the north of England. I'm very proud to be from the north of England. We started Castore in Liverpool. We're now based in Manchester. We've created 500 jobs in this part of the world. But when I was young, and this was kind of 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it felt that if you were ambitious, if you wanted to make something of yourself, you had to go to London. And that really, really pissed me off. Again, excuse my language, I'm going to try my best not to swear. But I kind of went down to London. I wasn't particularly numerical. I had the grand total of 0 qualifications. Yet somehow, and I think this is being recorded, so hopefully I'm not going to get anyone at Lloyds Bank fired, but I managed to talk someone at Lloyds Bank into giving me a job. I'm fairly certain that I failed all of the numerical tests, but the guy was a football fan, and we spent 56 minutes of the hour interview talking about football, which led him to want to give me a job. I basically went into banking because I had decided already that having failed at football, I didn't want to go and get a real job. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to start a business. My brother and I had spoken about it a lot. And the big macro analysis that I'd done is, if I'm going to start a business, I'm going to need some money. I don't have any money. Where can I earn money as quickly as possible? That'll be in the banking industry. So let's go and get a job in banking. And again, I won't go off topic, but there's actually a lot of very good people in the finance world that I do think get a very hard time. But let's not go into that now, because I'm sure there'll be differences of opinion in the room. But spent 3 years learning about the fundamentals of finance. You learn about a load of different businesses. I absolutely loved the fact that I got to go out probably 4 days out of 5 each week and go and meet someone that was running a company, which, as someone in their early 20s at that time, was just an unbelievable experience. And I will try and wrap up some of the key points that I want to make at the end for people. But one of the big ones that, if anyone wants to write anything down, is the biggest benefits that you derive in your career will come from people. So every time you get an opportunity to come to a lecture like this, to go and meet someone, get your arse off the sofa, get on that train, do whatever it takes, because all that is required is that one person takes a liking to you and your life can change. And I guess I am living proof of that, because when I was at Lloyds, because I didn't have any qualifications and I wasn't very good at counting, which kind of two fairly base requirements to do well in a bank, they put me in not particularly interesting department. And I thought, no, I don't want to work here. I want to be in a more interesting part. So I used to get up at 5 a.m. every day, get into the office at 6 a.m. And there was one other guy in the office at 6 a.m. And unsurprisingly, he had the best job in the office. He looked after all of the big clients. And I said to him, oh, look, they've got me working on this stuff. It's really boring. I don't enjoy it. Between the hours of 6 and 9 in the morning and then 5 and 8 at night, can I come and work for you? And I guess free labor. He was like, brilliant. Absolutely. Yes, you can. And through that, I got to go out and meet his clients. And one of them was, or two of them were brothers, ironically, called Mohsin and Zuba Isa. Amazing entrepreneurs, kind of first generation Indian immigrants, set up their first petrol station, I think, at the age of 16. 25 years later, they're one of the largest independent operator of forecourts globally. Amazing success story. And I will come on to this, I got to know Mohsin and Zuba through being taken out to this meeting. And 5 or 6 years later, after we'd started Castore and I'd begun to scale the business, Mohsin and Zuba invested in Castore. And I can't speak for them, of course, but I'm almost certain that they weren't investing in the business plan or the margins or the return on capital employed or the free cash generation, which is a good thing because they definitely wouldn't have invested if they were looking at the numbers. But they invested based on us as people and I would hope, the drive, the passion, the desire that we had to make Castore successful. And I wouldn't have got in a room with those guys unless I'd asked that chap back at Lloyd's, can I do your work for you before 9 a.m. when I need to do my main job? So I'm not suggesting that everyone needs to do that. That would probably be overkill. But I am saying that was really something that was very important that helped me be successful. So going out there, meeting people, trying your best to leave people with a positive impression, incredibly powerful. So I guess fast forward to Castore, and I will tell you a bit about the business. Again, as was said in the opening remarks, once we decided to start a company, we basically came to a really simple conclusion, which was looking statistically at the amount of companies that start and fail within a year. It's highly likely that we're going to fail. So whatever we do, let's have some fun along the way. The only chance that we've got of being successful is if we're doing something that we are deeply and genuinely passionate about. And the only thing that we're both deeply and genuinely passionate about is sport. So we decided to start a sportswear brand. The thesis was super simple. We said, okay, you've got a multi-billion-dollar global industry. It's really dominated by 3 brands, Nike, Adidas, Puma. That's not completely true because there are a couple of others, but really they're the big 3 that dominate it. And there's not really many other industries of that size and scale, particularly with the growth drivers that sports has, that are dominated by 3 brands. So if you look at luxury, there's a lot more brands. If you look at watches, if you look at the automotive market, there's a lot more, albeit it's been consolidated a lot. There are a couple of examples. So aircraft manufacturing, you've got Boeing and Airbus that kind of have a quasi-monopoly or duopoly on that industry. But we kind of felt this is too big a market with 2 stronger drivers behind it. Why is there not space for an alternative to Nike, Adidas, and Puma? And people may or may not have heard of the brand Lululemon, but we looked very closely at Lululemon. They were growing quickly, basically with a really simple ethos, which was we're a premium aspirational alternative to the big 3. We're going to be focused on yoga and well-being, and that will be our point of difference in the market. And they were doing that really well in North America. They hadn't really come over to the UK at that point, and they were primarily focused on women's rather than menswear. So we felt, okay, the thesis clearly works to be a premium alternative to the big brands. Why don't we do that, but be a men's rather than women's centric brand? And we'll do it in the UK rather than the US. So as you can see, this really wasn't rocket science, but we thought we're passionate. There's a gap in the market. Let's go for it. I genuinely could talk about this for 4 hours, which don't worry, I know everyone's got better places to be, so I won't do that. But that journey between idea, inception, and starting the company is undoubtedly the hardest part. So anyone in this room who is thinking about starting a company, maybe started to take steps towards that, the early part is undoubtedly the most difficult. And the only advice that I can give, I guess to quote Winston Churchill, is that when you're going through hell, just keep going. That is literally the only thing that you can do. And I do think that entrepreneurship is glamorized a lot. It's amazing. It's changed my life. It's changed my family's life. I cannot think of anything else that I would rather do when my alarm goes off at 5 a.m. every morning. But Jesus Christ, it's hard work. There's no safety net. There is very little support network. You're constantly faced with doubters and people that will point out a million reasons why what you're doing is not going to work. Again, that's another aside, which I won't go into, but it's funny how great people are at telling you how something won't work rather than you giving you advice on how it can work. But there we go. But once you get going, once you build that traction, it's equally amazing how momentum can take hold. And I'm a massive believer that, to my point earlier, the world rewards positive energy. If you put positive energy out there, if you keep going, it may not happen on the timeline that you want. You may get a lot more no's and setbacks before you eventually get to where you want to be. But undoubtedly, you will be rewarded if you keep putting positivity out there, if you just keep going. Already, you're ahead of 99% of the population if you've tried to start a company, if you've taken steps towards that, because most people give up at the first hurdle. It's really hard to remember that when you're going through it, but it's an incredibly important lesson. we got rejected. It was certainly over 50. I wouldn't want to say a number because I'll misspeak, but surprisingly, not many people were willing to give money to two idiots from Merseyside who thought they could build a brand that would take on Nike and Adidas. So people were very quick to point out all of the flaws in the plan, of which there were a lot. So eventually, the only people that were willing to give us some money were our mum and dad. They didn't have any money, so they remortgaged the house. And again, not something that I would recommend to anyone in the room, because that put a pit of fear in my heart that I still don't think has fully subsided, even though we've since paid them back by kind of numerous factors. But that really instilled a will to win, that lit a fire inside both of us, where nothing to do with a business plan, nothing to do with any analysis or data, but something that said, we are not going to fail. Whatever happens here, we are not going to fail. I'm going to make enough money. I'm going to make this business successful enough that I'm going to be able to pay my mum and dad back. And we were still working at that time, so we were both still in jobs down in London. And we basically used our holidays to fly to Portugal to meet factory owners. And I vividly remember a scene where I'd flown over to Portugal. Generally, factories don't like working with new customers because you represent a risk. And if they set their machinery and they train their staff up to develop your particular product, and then you go bust, that they've just wasted a load of time and energy. So you have to work really hard to convince factories to work with you. And I was sat across a table from this factory owner, Pedro, his name was, and he didn't speak a word of English, and I speak precisely zero Portuguese. So it was quite an interesting lunch, but somehow I managed to convince him to work with us and give us a chance. And we launched Castore. I think it was 5 products, one website, 5 products, and just worked really, really hard. So I spent my weekends stood outside posh gyms in London, because I was basically like, my customers are going to be affluent men. Where do affluent men who care about fitness go? They go to posh gyms. So I'd stand outside the posh gyms and try to convince the personal trainers to wear our product, and said, look, if you wear it and your clients buy it, I'll give you a commission on the sale. So it was kind of a pre-Instagram social influencer marketing. I think Instagram had been set up, but we kind of did it in quite an analogous, very old-fashioned way. But it worked. And every Sunday I would look down the order list, because one of the big benefits, of course, of starting a website is that you have data on all of your customers. So I'd look at the email list of everyone who had ordered that week. And in the early days, it really wasn't that long a list, so it didn't take me that long. But I'd email everyone on that list and say, look, I'm the founder, co-founder, really appreciate you ordering. We're this small business. We've got these big ambitions. Thank you so much for your order. We genuinely appreciate it. Is there anything we can do, etc.? And I was amazed, and still am to this day, how many people would respond to that, and how literally 6 months earlier, anyone had emailed saying, I was starting a business. Would you be interested in investing? Could I come and tell you about the idea? Would get almost 0 responses. After I'd started, the responses were the complete opposite. People want to support you. People want to be associated with success. So to that point earlier, the hardest part is the beginning. Once you get going, once you develop a real product, once you launch a real website and people can touch and feel it, the paradigm shifts completely, and the opportunity for people to engage with you and help you changes immeasurably. So we were very lucky. We managed to get going. We built the business. And then this slide, I should have said at the start, by the way, I once watched a video by Steve Jobs, who I've mentioned a couple of times already, big business hero of mine, who said, as a founder, if you can't describe your business without slides, you don't, if you need slides to understand your business, you don't understand it well enough. So I do try my best to describe Castore without slides, but I'm not quite as good as Steve Jobs yet. So I do have a couple, but this slide really kind of demonstrates what we do. And to set the context for this, we grew the business quickly. We had £30,000 to get going. I don't know what we did, less than £1 million in the first year, which I guess sounds like a big number and is a big number, but in the context of the sportswear market globally, it's absolutely minuscule. But we did £1 million. We grew pretty quickly and pretty nicely. And then the big catalyst for Castore to, I guess, go on to achieve what it has in subsequent years was we looked at the market for team sports, football, rugby, cricket, Formula One, and said that market really doesn't work very well. It's again dominated by the big three, Nike, Adidas, Puma, but the big three only really care about the very biggest and best teams in the world. Real Madrid, Barcelona, I suppose I can't say Man United are still a big team despite current pain, but Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, and they kind of ignored everyone else. And the realization we came to was, well, we've built a brand. Castore is kind of credible as a brand now. We've done a couple of partnerships with people like Andy Murray and others. We built a supply chain by that point. We built a digital platform. We had a relatively decent distribution network. We could sell product in quite a few countries around the world. The question we asked ourselves was, why can't we leverage that infrastructure that we've built to go and disrupt this market for team sports, partner with all of the teams that are ignored by Nike, Adidas, Puma, because they're so big that they just don't care about them. And most importantly, to disintermediate the retailers, because the vast majority of sportswear merchandise has historically been sold through third-party retailers, JD Sports, Sports Direct, Dick's Sporting Goods in America, Rebel Sports in Australia. And we said that kind of doesn't make any sense, because if I'm a sports fan, and I am a sports fan, I want to buy the shirt from the team that I support. It's an emotional purchase. I want to feel like I'm giving money to the team that I support. I don't want to feel like I'm giving it to a retailer. So we said, why can't we think about this market in a different way? It had very little disruption. It had very little innovation. So basically, and what you can see on this slide, is we built the digital infrastructure that allowed us to go to sports teams and speak to them in a way that no one had spoken to them before, and say, look, I don't just want to be an advertising partner. I don't just want my logo on your chest. I'll take that because it's nice visibility. A lot of people watch football and will see my logo because of it. But what I really want to do is become a service provider to you, where I will give you access to my digital infrastructure that helps you cut out the retailers, sell products directly to the fan. And even me, who left school at 16, knows that if profit is being shared with two people, Castore and the football club, that's more margin for both parties than if it's being shared with three people, Castore, the football club, and a retailer. So there was higher margins. We could share more of that profit with the teams. And very quickly, it became apparent that this was a model that no one else had ever thought about. It's really simple in my mind, which, again, I guess as another aside, most of the best ideas are pretty simple. But as soon as we started speaking to teams about this, it became really apparent that a lot of teams really liked to hear what we were saying. So as you can see there, and this is what I present to investors, by the way, when I'm trying to get the biggest valuation for my business, but we talk a lot about distribution, global distribution capability, about digital marketing capability, about data analytics capability. Most sports teams hadn't really thought about this stuff historically, because again, I don't know if there are sports fans in the audience or watching online. Most sports fans don't, or almost all sports fans do not change the team that they support ever. You get told as a kid that you support Man United, Liverpool, Everton, whoever it is, and probably you're going to go to your grave still supporting that same team, whether they've won a trophy or not. So when you have that stickiness of customer base, as you could describe it, the teams don't really need to work hard to keep customers happy, which had made it easy for them just to sell product into retailers and not think about it. So for us to actually think about this in a slightly more progressive, forward-thinking way and say, well, actually, why don't you have data on these customers? Why don't you try and sell to them directly? Why don't you try and understand whether they like buying that coloured shirt or that coloured, and how you stagger the launches and all of this good stuff? And this was genuinely unique. And again, I don't want to go into all of the boring slides. Probably the one that we've got quite a few partners now. That's where the grey hair comes from. But probably the slide that best articulates what we do is this one. We go and partner with teams and try and help them digitize their revenues and grow their revenues. So the way that I think of it is I'm doing an MBO, a management buyout of that sports team's merchandise business. And I can't talk about the numbers, unfortunately, because I'll get in trouble. But generally, these are tens of millions of pounds revenue that these teams generate globally. So I think of myself as I'm buying your merchandise business. I'm not buying a Red Bull brand. I'm not buying a McLaren brand, but I'm buying your merchandise business rather than it previously being part of a far broader ecosystem where it would get 5%, 10% of their management's time. I'm going to give it 100% of my time. I'm going to have the specialist infrastructure, the specialist team that can optimize this, and I'm going to try and grow their revenues. And I guess the backdrop to this 21, 22, this is set against an economy that has gone sideways at best, where inflation has been higher than it's been for generations. Is that an overstatement? I don't know. Give or take. People have generally not felt particularly affluent. So to deliver, let me choose the best number, 287% growth in that economy is not an easy thing to do. Again, driven by the fact that hopefully Castore are quite good at what we do, but probably more importantly, if I'm honest, that this had really not been done very well historically. So when I did my first sports partnership, it was with Rangers actually. I didn't have any track record. I didn't have any proof that this model worked. I had to sell them on my belief that I could make this work better, which thankfully I was able to do. As soon as we'd done Rangers, and I could put that slide in front of people and say, look, if you let me do this and you choose Castore over Nike or Adidas, one, I can look you in the eye and say you'll be a priority to me. Go and ask Nike if they can do the same. And secondly, look what I did for Rangers. Look how much I've grown their revenue. Look how much profit I've shared with them more than anyone else. Go and ask Nike if they can do the same. So once we'd done one of these partnerships, we were able to grow very quickly, which was the previous slide. And in terms of how well we've done it, this, and I'm conscious of time, I don't know how much more I've got, but this slide again is something that I present to investors. And again, if anyone is starting a business and raising money, you start to pick up the phrases that people like to hear. Mostly they don't make any sense, but they all like to hear them. And one of them is the flywheel effect. They like to know that your business has a flywheel, which is basically as one thing happens, a related thing starts to happen faster. And the flywheel effect that Castore has when it's working well, which is not all the time. But basically, as I partner with more teams and my portfolio grows, my cost of customer acquisition on the Castore website comes down because more people are seeing my logo. My logo has more credibility and desirability because all these good-looking, cool athletes with millions of Instagram followers are wearing my logo every day. That is not something that a normal brand has. I was literally, when I was walking over here for this discussion, on the phone to one of the two founders of Sweaty Betty, the female activewear brand, got sold a couple of years ago for about 400 million quid, give or take. And he was saying, oh, Tom, I wish we had the visibility that you guys do. So the flywheel in my business is that the more partners I have, the better my brand becomes and business grows. And again, I don't want to bore you guys with the data, but that slide in a very kind of geeky way outlines that point that every time I sign a team, more fans of that team are likely to buy the Castore brand. So this is a slide that I'm quite proud of, and maybe is quite a nice one to finish on. Business, I'm going to be really cliche, so forgive me, but it genuinely is a marathon, not a sprint. And again, all of us, and I still like to think of myself as young, even though I'm 34, but I guess everyone in this room will have grown up in the era of social media where everything is about instant success. We're all guilty of looking at what the guy or girl next to us is doing and benchmarking our success against them. And I'm as guilty as anyone on it. The only time I post on LinkedIn is when I've done something good. I don't post about all the fuck ups that we make. Surprise, surprise. So success is never linear. There's no singular path to success. That said, I am genuinely proud of how quickly we've been able to grow the business. So I guess a couple of caveats. FY24, we're a January financial year end. So that FY24 is calendar year 23. And we actually outperformed those numbers slightly. So we did a couple of 100 million quid revenue. We managed to do that whilst being profitable. And per the point on the left-hand side, we've managed to deliver that growth faster than pretty much anyone else out there, which, as always, the past is no definitive guide to the future, but hopefully we're on to something decent. And I mean, this one always makes me feel slightly strange because as was said in the outset, vividly remember not just packing the orders on my mum's kitchen table, but as I alluded to, that pit of fear and pain in my stomach when my mum told me that they were going to remortgage the house and give us money to get Castore off the ground and to kind of go from there mentally to, I guess, being worth a few quid is a bit of a strange transition mentally to make. And it's funny because I always used to think that, oh yeah, if I can get the business to this level or that level, or if we're worth that much, I'm going to give it up. I'm going to go and play golf. And then I realized that I'm really not that good at golf and it would be quite boring quite quickly. And having been on the journey that we've had and had the success that we've been fortunate enough to have, you realize that, and this won't be the first time you've heard this, so forgive me, but it is the journey that makes it fun. I get up every day, I'm doing something with my brother. We want to build a great British sportswear brand that isn't defined by numbers, whether you're worth this much or this much or this much is completely irrelevant to me. Like, yes, it's been nice to be able to give my mum and dad the money back and buy them a house. Of course, that's nice. It'd be nice for everyone in this room. But what gets you out of bed in the morning isn't how much money you earn. I used to think that, and it's easy to say now, but even back at the beginning, it isn't the money that gets you out of bed in the morning. It isn't being worth X or Y or Z. There's a couple of, I guess, to my mind, key values or drivers that if you can live your life by, or your career, certainly, you've hopefully got a decent chance of being successful. So for me, the first one, and I've said the word numerous times already, but it is passion. And you guys are at a stage in your life where probably you've got a bit more time than most. Like, my diary is pretty hectic and I'll go back to the office after this and have 50 emails to deal with, and you don't really get time to think because you're just doing. So you guys are at a stage in your life where, I'm sure it won't feel like it all the time, but you probably have more time than most. Use that time to work out what you're passionate about. Like, what do you daydream about when you go into bed at night? What is that thing that you can't get out of your head? Be curious about the world and try and think, what could be done better? I'm seeing something, but why is it done that way? Ask those questions of people. Write cold emails to people or letters. You'll be amazed. You won't get everyone respond, but you'll be amazed at how often people respond. But you will not get anywhere in life, in my opinion, unless you find what you're truly passionate about. So if there's anything that anyone's going to take from this talk, I would hope that it is that I was very lucky to find my passion young. I thought it was going to manifest itself in being a professional footballer and making loads of money at the age of 18. Life had different plans, but then that passion changed form, changed direction, and led me somewhere else that I never planned, I never expected. There was no grand plan, but it's all been driven by, I love sport. This is not a job to me. I love working out, trying to work out ways of doing things different and better and more innovatively. I love competing against these massive global brands like Nike and Adidas that I've no right really to compete with, but why not? If anyone can do it, why not me? But that all stems from passion. So if you guys are going to do anything, it's work really hard to find out what that is. Everything becomes a lot easier thereafter. Secondly, and again, I'm trying to not be cliched here, but for me, the word is people. Who you spend your time with is going to drive your energy. Like, I always try and be a positive influence on whoever I come into contact with. You're not going to be best mates with everyone, particularly in business. You're going to fall out with people. And as you get bigger, you have banks that you manage and investors and stakeholders, and things won't always go well. But the energy that you bring into the room, people will remember that more than what you actually say. People are going to remember how you made them feel. So you want to be surrounded by people that share your energy, share your outlook. Don't necessarily agree with you on everything. That's probably not healthy, but have similar values, a similar approach to the world that give you positive energy, because there's nothing more demoralizing in life than being surrounded by people that love finding ways to say no. And there's a lot of those people out there. So when you're choosing your first job, when you're starting a company, whatever it is that everyone goes off to do with the next stage in your lives, finding the right people to me is more important than actually what you're doing itself, because as I said at the beginning, very few people can be successful on their own. If you find the right people to come with you on the journey and are as excited about that journey as you are, you're massively increasing your chances of success. And the final one, and I've just realized that this is an alliteration with 3 Ps. That was not my intention. But the third one is perseverance. And again, just like here, you look at all the kind of press releases that we have, or the nice things that people write. There's a lot of nasty things that people have written about us that surprisingly don't make it into the presentation. We didn't write about the time that people have rejected us, that we lost deals, that we messed things up, and we had to learn some really harsh lessons. If you're starting a business, those lessons will be particularly acute because there isn't the same safety net. But if you guys are in kind of corporations, in other companies, there's going to be times where you don't feel like you're making progress. Your career isn't progressing as fast as you would like to. And it sounds so basic, but to still bring that same energy, to still bring that same positivity when you feel as if you should have got that promotion or pay rise and someone else got it, that's really hard to do. But if you can be the guy or girl that does it, you're actually in a really small minority of people that do persevere when times get tough. So having perseverance, again, hard for that to manifest itself. It'll be different to everyone. But if you can bring passion, if you're working with the right people every day and you don't give up when times get tough, you still bring that same positive approach to things. I don't know if you'll do what we've done. I don't know if we'll be a success tomorrow, the next day or the day after, but I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy the journey. So I don't know if I've spoken for too long there, but are we okay?
Take a break. Give him a round of applause.
Sorry, not too long.
I mean, if there isn't anyone watching this stuff, doesn't want to go and become after all that, then something wrong somewhere. Tom, you made loads of really fantastic points there. Not least one thing that I hear from entrepreneurs all the time, which is that there's always someone in their life that's given them a bit of advice and believed in them. For you, it's obviously the guy at Lloyds Bank and then later the Eastern brothers. But the other point that you made, which is so important, I think, is not being afraid to fail, which is something in this country that we don't really, the Americans have no fear of that. We do in this country. Why do you think that is?
Nice, easy question to start. I don't know, but I mean, I do completely agree. I was in San Francisco with some investors a month or so ago, and I absolutely loved it. I met some amazing people. And by the way, I've got cousins who are American. I love my American cousins and friends over there. But I'm yet to meet an American business person who doesn't speak as if they were personally responsible for the success of capitalism. So they just have this innate belief. And I suppose, as I alluded to, Ian, why can't I do something? And it's not luck, is it, that some of the best, most successful, innovative companies in the world are started over there? And I think the answer to it is what you said in your question. They've got an amazing culture in America where failure is not penalized in the way it is. You don't have that negative connotation with it over here, which, looking back, when Phil and I started, we didn't have a fear of failure because we didn't have anything to lose. Like, we didn't like our lives as they were. We were trying to improve our lives. So not through choice, but there was no fear of failure. And it's really hard to keep hold of that feeling as you have success, because one, you do have stuff to lose, and that's hard for that not to affect your mindset. And secondly, you have a lot more stakeholders. So like I said, I now manage banks and investors and suppliers and partners, and it's really hard to keep that. I'm just going to do what I believe is right. But if you can do it, and I guess that's the essence of entrepreneurialism, is taking risks without perfect information, without knowing what the future holds. But again, I actually look at it as a positive. If not as many people in the UK want to do that as the US, brilliant, because I'll do it, and I'll be one of a smaller number then.
You mentioned there the infrastructure that you built up, the supply chains that you built up. As the business has got bigger, how have you managed to remain focused on the customers and what they want?
With difficulty is the honest answer. And it's amazing, Ian, because we've been on this transition super quickly. Like, I don't know if it's a binary number where you go from 1 million to 10 to 100 million revenue, whether kind of certain things change at certain points. I guess it'll probably be different for everyone, but there's kind of this creeping feeling that you get that at the beginning, I'm the founder, co-founder, so I'm in charge of everything. I'm sales, I'm marketing, I'm customer service, I'm manufacturing. You do everything. But of course, as you get big, it's impossible. It's not hard. It's impossible to do that. Equally, if you get the right people in who not just have better specialist skills than you do in those areas, but more importantly, share your enthusiasm and drive and passion and culture, which is a often overused word. But if you can get that right, it becomes a lot easier to stay focused on the customer, stay focused on, well, what is the thing that makes us successful. And again, I don't want to be a kind of pretending to be an oracle, because I'm far from it. I make more mistakes than anyone. I can guarantee that. But if you're going into a company, if you're starting your own business, and you can work out what the culture is, what the founder or your boss wants from you, and you can be the guy or girl that is aligned with that and gives it to them, you're going to be pretty successful. I want people that understand how I work, why I'm so passionate about Castore around me, and they're the people that progress quickly within the business. So yeah, building a culture is the key thing that allows you to stay focused on what's important.
Talked about the difficulties that you had right at the early stage, the startup stage. I mean, I hear from an awful lot of startups. One of the issues, the challenges that I think it's a cultural thing in the UK, it's scale up. There's no problem with startups for a lot of businesses. It's scaling up. You seem to have achieved that relatively quickly. What would you say to people who agonize about scaling up?
Exactly that, Ian. Don't agonize, like go for it, because what I said earlier was true. The hardest bit is the beginning. Yet so many people get through that and then seem to have this mindset of, oh, now I do have something to lose. And I don't judge anyone whatsoever, because everyone's journey is individual and different. And maybe they remortgage their house to start the business and then manage to pay off the mortgage. And that for them is the definition of success, which good on them, massively respect it. But in my strong opinion, if you've been through the stresses and hardships to get it going, why the hell have you gone that far just to come that far? Like, you've got to see how far you can take it. And again, the difference between America and the UK, there's many differences, of course, but that is one of the big ones. I think that the mindset over here is, okay, yeah, it works. I'm going to be grateful for what I've got, rather than, no, I'm not grateful. I want to see how far I can take this thing.
But is it also not down to the providers of capital? I mean, it's not just an entrepreneurial hang-up. I mean, a lot of, certainly in the tech sector in particular, you see businesses that are capable of scaling up, but it's at that point that the US companies come in and buy them. You know, a very good example would be the way that DeepMind got bought by Google.
Yes. So absolutely, there are a lot of examples, aren't there? And Darktrace recently got to a certain scale and then got acquired by a US company. There's myriad reasons for that, and I'm not sure that anytime soon the UK markets are going to have a deeper pool of liquidity than the US. So I'm not sure that will change necessarily. But I personally think that the biggest thing stopping UK companies taking that next step and going from being a really good startup company to a gazelle, a scale up, whatever term you want to use, it is an internal one, is a mindset one. Maybe it's easier to raise funding in the US, but you know what? It's a hell of a lot easier in the UK than it is in many other countries. So we're benchmarking ourselves against the very, very best when we say it's easier in the US. So if you want to raise capital, it's out there. It may not be perfect capital, there may not be the perfect partners, but if there's a lot of dry powder in the world, there's been a lot of quantitative easing since 2008. If you're an ambitious entrepreneur and you knock on enough doors, there'll be someone that wants to invest in you.
And how have you and your brother managed this transition of having external shareholders?
That isn't something that you can read in a book, I don't think. And like I say, Phil went to university, I didn't. And I think we've really benefited from having that kind of difference of background, because we approach problems from very different perspectives and we debate them coming from different angles. But like everything in life, we've each got our strengths and weaknesses, haven't we? And my brother isn't a big fan of human beings. He likes his happy places, sat looking at spreadsheets, being in granular detail about margins and distribution costs and different lines on the P&L or the cash flow. And he's amazing at that. And I would kill myself if I had to do that every day. So I probably spend more time engaging with investors, and that isn't something that Phil and I kind of sat down and discussed. It just happened organically, but you learn it as you go along. And again, I didn't go to business school. I didn't have any formal education. I can't think of anything that I've learned along the journey that a semi-intelligent person like me can't pick up. It's all down to people. Investors want to know, is this guy going to do the right thing, or is this person going to do the right thing? Do they care about building the best possible business? Do they have integrity? After that, the rest is noise. You work it out. That helps.
We've got time for questions. If anyone would like to put one to Tom, gentleman there. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Really interesting. I was wondering if I can take you back to that first round of pre-seed funding that you were doing, and having a little bit of look on Crunchbase and Red Rice, and then like Robert came in a little bit, and then there was Arnold or something, but a little bit about like the mindset, how you feel, the stress of it. You knocked down a lot of doors, and you perhaps weren't getting all the answers, and then you've already perhaps said you've done $1 million in revenue at that stage, but just a bit about the mindset of it.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I don't know all the definitions, if I'm honest. Pre-seed, I guess, like pre-revenue, the only money we got was from our mum and dad, and we took that money, and yeah, we were about £1 million revenue, give or take, maybe a little bit less. I can't remember. But that was the hardest one. Just like I said, getting the thing going is the hardest, because you don't have any evidence really. So you're telling people about this great idea that you've had, but a lot of people in the world have great ideas. So probably there's two things that I remember from that time. One, I guess to that point, the more that you can show that you've actually done, you're head and shoulders above anyone else. And that doesn't all need to be revenue. Showing that whatever your business is, that you've got a product that you've gone and spoken to 1,000 people, and here's the results of that survey. Just doing stuff gives investors at that level, because it's a different investor from an institutional investor. It gives them that comfort that, okay, yeah, here's a person that does and does not just talk. So actually getting stuff done, proving, having evidence was, even if it's not perfect evidence, was something that I really remember from that time. And secondly is, and maybe this is a contradictory point, they're not investing in the business plan, they're investing in you as a human. So they want to look you in your eyes and understand that, as I said earlier, this is a person that's going to do whatever it takes to be successful. And that sounds easy, doesn't it, when you say it? But what's so hard about that is when you have 30 meetings and they all say no, it's the 31st, it's the 41st, it's the 51st, that you have to go in with that same energy, that same drive, that same passion. Because if you come off even 1%, that one meeting where that person could have been predisposed to say yes, you weren't on your best game. And that's really difficult, because again, we're sat here in a lecture theatre. Out there, you're being thrown into the ocean with no life, with no armbands on. If you don't swim and do it for yourself, you will drown. Sorry to use quite an aggressive analogy. That wasn't what I meant or what I intended, but you've just got to go into everything like, this is the one that's going to be successful. Sounds easy, is a lot harder to do. But again, if you can do that, and I'm living evidence of it, eventually there'll be someone somewhere that rewards you for it. The world rewards perseverance, no doubt in my mind about that.
Hi, thank you for that. It was so inspiring to hear about your story up until now. Obviously extremely impressive to have accomplished so much before the age of 35. My question is about what you want to do next. What's your next goal for yourself or for Castore?
It's a great question. Honestly, it hasn't changed. So when we started, we wanted to create a British sportswear brand that competed on the global stage. That was the mission. That was the North Star, whatever word you want to use. And that is exactly the same now. So at the beginning, we didn't quite know all of the steps that we take to get there. And right now, I'm sure there'll be things that happen in the next 5 or 10 years that right now I can't foresee. I'm far from an expert on AI, but I'm fairly certain it's going to affect all of our lives, how we live and how we work. So I don't get myself too stressed out about the path that we take, but that North Star, that mission of wanting to build a British sportswear brand that is recognised and hopefully respected all over the world, that for me that's the thing that still gets me out of bed. And it's to Ian's point earlier, my day changes a lot, or kind of the things that I do every day has changed significantly from the beginning. But if the mission doesn't change and you can bring people around you that believe in that mission, you've a pretty decent chance of getting there, I think.
Hi. So my question is, I think your breakthrough came in 2019 when Andy Murray signed up for, or you partnered with Andy Murray. So my question is, how did you identify Andy Murray as the face or the person you want to partner with, and how did you convince, considering your size back then?
Yeah. So again, I don't want to quote numbers because I'll get them wrong, but we were growing at that point, and Phil and I, again, you go through this weird mindset change away from every day is about survival. And probably the first 2 years, maybe the first 3 years, were literally I need enough money to come into this website every week for me to pay my bills every week, and it was no more or less complex than that. It's quite a good way to live because at least you know what it is that you're trying to do every week. Life is pretty simple. But once we'd proven that the business worked, the brand resonated with people, we said, okay, well, how are we going to take it to the next level? How are we going to get more eyeballs on the brand? I don't want to go and buy a load of advertising in the newspaper. I don't want to go and kind of sponsor influencers on social media. Got nothing against them, but it didn't feel like the right fit for us. We said we're a performance brand. Our brand maxim, our brand DNA is better never stops, which kind of we like to think represents us and how we've approached things. And Andy Murray, to my mind, is almost the perfect embodiment of that. So we decided we wanted to partner with an athlete. We decided Andy was a great fit. And instead of kind of going through the traditional channels, which would be to reach out to an agent or an intermediary, we'd gift Castore product to all the people around him. So his hitting partners, his coaches, his masseur, his trainers, basically. So he kept seeing the brand, like, oh, what's that? And I guess, as the old saying goes, the harder you work, the luckier you get. He was coming to the end of his previous kit partnership deal just at the time as we started doing this, and someone said, oh yeah, these guys, it's a British brand and you're British and it's two brothers and you've got a brother, and I managed to get a meeting with him, went down, and again, I can't speak for Andy, but I suspect very similarly as with the early investors in the business, he's thinking, don't really know what this guy's talking about, but he's pretty passionate, so I'm going to give him a go. And yeah, he took a massive risk on us, which I'm eternally grateful for. And that was the first big catalyst. So those partnerships that I talked about earlier, financially, kind of have made a big difference. But Andy was the first partnership that gave us credibility. People respected us a lot more after that. It made a big difference.
He's quite an astute investor, isn't he, Andy Murray? He's got quite a few things he's backed. Paddle is another one.
He's a smart guy, and the way we did our partnership with Andy was basically his market value was up here. The money I had in the bank was down here. So he said, okay, well, how do we bridge that gap? Why don't you become an investor in the business at a discounted valuation, and that number will bridge that gap? And it's become a lot more common that now you see, like, kind of Jay-Z and Beyonce and these superstars will take equity in companies, but Andy was really pioneering in that, and fair play to him, and he'll do well out of it, and I'm very glad that he'll do well out of it.
Probably only got time for one more, if that's all right. There, it is that the floodgates have opened there.
So hi, I'm Sarthak. It was lovely hearing about how you built the platform from scratch, considering you didn't have any experience in textiles or garments before. So my question is, going forward, are you planning on purely developing the platform side of things, getting into deals with more teams, or kind of also investing your time into doing technical research into textiles or maybe undertaking manufacturing in your own hands rather than outsourcing it to someone in Italy or in Portugal?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. The short answer is both. So again, once you bring on institutional investment, so professional investors as we have now, I guess everything that I said earlier about they're investing in you as a person and your passion, that's kind of not true anymore. Like they have their investors, they have to prove to them that they've done proper diligence, and everything becomes, or a lot more, it becomes numerical. There's still, is this a good person? But it becomes numerical. So they will look at things like, okay, these guys have partnered with X Premier League football teams. How many could they go and partner with around the world? What will the average revenue be? What will the average margin be? And they'll build pretty sophisticated financial models. So partnering with teams is definitely kind of a big part of the growth strategy. I guess I have a big macro view, and you need to be careful how you word this, because sports fans don't like to think of themselves as customers, and they definitely don't like to think of themselves as being monetized. But there's some really kind of strong, powerful data that shows the average revenue per fan for a US sports franchise is X, and the average revenue per fan for a non-US or Premier League football, cricket, Formula One is Y. And there's a big gap between those two. So the opportunity to better monetize sports franchises we think is really interesting. And really, we're just a European-centric sports business at the moment. We've got some partnerships in Australia and looking at some interesting things, but there's a lot of runway, as investors like to say, for growth in that market. But, and I feel really passionately about this, the value in my business is in the Castore brand equity. Like hopefully long after I'm gone, they put me in the ground, those wings will represent performance, ambition, passion for sport. And that is something that is very hard to put a value on. So long term, the partnerships drive short term growth, and hopefully I can continue to grow them for the long term. But way beyond that short, medium, long term is the Castore brand equity, which for me, unless I focus on that, the textiles, the storytelling, building emotive connections with customers, that for me is where the real value in the business sits. The skill for me as the co-founder is knitting the two together, hopefully in harmony, which is easier said than done.
You've got time for one minute?
Yeah.
I think there's a woman towards the back that wanted to ask one. Was there? Oh, there we go.
Which do we go for? That.
Let's do both.
Hi, Tom. I'm Ravich. Thank you so much for this. It was really, really inspiring. And congratulations on the recent acquisition with Infinity.
Thank you.
I'm just curious to know that because Infinity is also involved with non-sports sort of merchandising, etc., is this a plan to even diversify into something outside of sports?
That's another brilliant question.
Should say, by the way, they're also supplied to the University of Manchester. So
There we
better
go.
get a declaration of interest in
now we're friends. So this has been recorded, so I have to be a little bit diplomatic. There's so much scope for us to grow our business in our core markets of sport that there's a strong argument to say, and my board members make this argument often, go and focus on doing that really well. If you do that really well and you go from having 50 sports team partners to 100 to 150, you'll build a really good business. And that's true. But I'm an entrepreneur and I don't always like to do what's logical. I like to do what gets me excited. And I heard a stat the other day, I don't know if this is true, so don't quote me on it, that there's more Peppa Pig merchandise sold annually than Real Madrid and Barcelona revenue combined. And I was like, I mean, I don't have kids, so Peppa Pig is not something I spend a lot of time thinking about. But I guess the logic is that, again, once I have this infrastructure, a global supply chain, a global technology platform, a global distribution capability, and the ability to analyze and monetize data, in theory, why would you contain that just to sports? Could you think about musicians who have big fan bases but don't necessarily have the expertise to do it themselves, or live events where you can go and sell product at live events in a way that maybe they don't have the ability, or films? You say, like, there's a big BBC franchise that's very successful. There's an amazing Ian King show and people want to buy an Ian King t-shirt. Does Ian have the ability to do that himself, or would he outsource it to a partner? that interests me. There's a lot for me to be focused on, but diversifying into other areas as an entrepreneur really excites me. It's a great question.
Hi there. I was going to say, going back to just, I think it's fascinating how some people make it and some people don't, just in regards to their personality. What would you say are kind of the main personality traits of the people? Because it really is, when you look at it, it really is just 1% of people like you who really push through and make it. What's the personality traits that they have, perhaps that other people don't?
Yeah. I'd almost want to change the premise of the question, because how do you define success? Like when we started, again, the numbers and all that stuff, that was never in our minds. So although it might on the surface look successful, my life is a hell of a lot more stressful now than it used to be. And without getting too deep and meaningful, the more that you focus on a business, the less time you're spending with your spouse, your family, your friends, the less energy you have to focus on other things in your life. So are you successful? And if you sell an extra £1 million worth of sportswear a year, is that a bigger contribution to the world than being a good brother, husband, partner, whatever? So yeah, we won't go down that route of what makes success. This is a business lecture, not a philosophy one, but honestly, it's what I said earlier. If you can find what you're passionate about, you're more than halfway there. And that doesn't mean that you're going to start a business necessarily that gets to this or that or the other. But if you wake up every day and you're doing something that you enjoy, honestly, the rest kind of looks after itself. And there's definitely a longer list in terms of, you could argue you build a really strong skill set. So if you're great at digital marketing, become the best person at that, and that will allow you to be successful. But in entrepreneurship, honestly, I don't think it's much more complicated than doing something that you love doing and just refusing to give up. And that's I think our thing that no one really picks up on, because we have been lucky enough to be quite successful and everyone focuses on that. But we just didn't stop. Like most normal, sane human beings would have stopped at the 30th projection, the 40th. Like even later on, when I said it gets easier, you still get a lot of rejections. Like we had some stuff in the media last year when the media come after you and you're like, Jesus, on a Friday night, you're trying to sit down and have a glass of wine and you're reading these articles on your phone about you, like, but you just keep going. And that's something that I don't think that many people have. And if you have that and you get up at the same time the next day and you're still positive, that for me is probably the biggest difference, just refusal to give up.
Tom, it's been brilliant listening to you. If we were on telly, I'd be shocked because we were supposed to finish 15 minutes ago. So
that's my fault.
Thanks for being so generous with your time. I'm just going to hand over to Ken to wrap up.
Okay, thanks very much, and definitely put me down for an Ian King t-shirt. I want one of those. We couldn't have been in the room tonight and not miss the fact that we have in Tom an amazing entrepreneur, someone who's got massive drive. But I think what came across more so was just that real innate business acumen to be able to identify a hugely profitable business idea. Look, we do have quite a lot of events across the business school. We're quite careful in how we curate these because we do want to convey to the outside world what we stand for. And at AMBS, we stand for innovation and entrepreneurship. We've got an aspiration to give every single student that steps through the doors, not just of AMBS, but through the doors of this amazing university, the opportunity to experience and participate in entrepreneurship activities and education. We do that through our Masood Entrepreneurship Centre. So it's brilliant to have you with us. Brilliant to have such an amazing company in Manchester. Isn't that great also? Exactly the kind of thing that we want to continue to promote. There will be further opportunity to ask questions. Make use of that point about connecting with people afterwards with some drinks and canapes in the foyer. And just a final announcement about an event we have tomorrow night with one of our own professors, Eric Buellin, who will be talking about his new book, Data Analytics and Digital Transformations. But Apologies for going slightly over the time, but I'm sure you'll agree it's been well worth it. So join us in congratulations.